I'm now letting everyone know we are recording and transcribing.
Shall we? Well, good evening. This is Bob Master speaking. I am counsel to the board of the Community Police Review Board. We are underway on our meeting of the 20th of February. We do not presently have officers, so to start the meeting, I'll take on some of these tasks, and then when we elect officers, I'll stand down and turn it over to the board president. So let's begin with a call to order. A roll call, please. Do we have from District 1, Shariah Williams?
Yes, I'm here.
Welcome. From District 2, do we have Comedique Thomas?
Present.
From District 3, do we have Kelly Johnson?
Present.
From District 4, do we have Luella Webster?
Present.
From District 5, do we have Dennis James Gibbons? Not present. From District 6, do we have Clara Davis? Representing at-large seat, do we have Joseph Adams?
Present.
Representing an at-large seat, do we have Otis Davis? Representing an at-large seat, do we have Cheryl Ash?
Present.
So I have Councilmember Williams is present remotely, Councilmember Thomas present in person, Councilmember Johnson present in person, Councilmember Webster present in person, Councilmember Adams present in person, and Councilmember Ash present in person. So we have 5 members present in person, 1 member joining us remotely. We have a quorum, so we can conduct business. Our second agenda item would have been the review and approval of minutes. However, I believe that because of the a lack of a quorum at the last meeting, there were no minutes or no official minutes kept. Is that, do I have that correct? Well, I suppose then, I don't think we need a motion, but I'd say we'll just take no action on that for lack of minutes, which would then take us to our third agenda item, the election of officers. Now, the ordinance calls for minimally the election of a president. I would recommend, though, that we also elect a vice president or vice chairperson and a secretary. So I suppose I'd open it up for either nominations or volunteers, first for president.
For board chair, I'd like to nominate Joseph Adams.
Is there a second for board member Adams?
I'll second
it.
Pardon me, I'm just taking notes. So we have Councilmember Ash moved to nominate Councilmember Adams, and the seconds were for, well, we had 2, but I think Councilmember Johnson, or board member Johnson, you may have been the first. So we'll say second from member Johnson. Is there any discussion, or are you prepared to put it to a vote? All right, we'll call a vote. All voting in favor for Joseph Adams for board president, signify by saying aye.
Cheryl, aye.
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 An aye.
Webster, aye.
Count 6 ayes. It's unanimous. Well, Chairman Johnson, at this point, I will defer to you, turn the meeting over to you to conduct the meeting. Thank you for your service.
I first would just like to start by thanking you all and thanking member Sharia who led us to this moment. So thank you for that. We need to continue with the elections of officers. So I'm going to yield back to our attorney for the completion of that agenda item.
Thank you. I would, although the ordinance doesn't require it, I think it would be in good form to elect a vice president or vice chair who could run the meetings in the absence of the board chair. So I'd open the floor for nominations or volunteers for vice chair.
I'd like to nominate Coleman E.
So we have a nomination from member Ash for member Thomas. Do we have a second?
I'm a second that.
We have a second from President Adams. Is there any discussion? Then shall we take a vote? All those in favor of member Thomas for vice chair signify by saying aye.
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 Hearing none opposed, the vote carries. So congratulations, member Thomas, and thank you for your service. I would ask then that we conclude the voting by electing a secretary whose duties would include taking the notes of this meeting. I have done some of that myself in the absence of a secretary. However, I would ask that if we elect a secretary this evening, that the secretary formally preserve those minutes. So do we have a nomination for board secretary?
Perhaps a point of order, Counselor.
Please.
Can we actually go through the actual position of secretary that may be provided by the ordinance?
Well, the ordinance does not actually call for the appointment of a secretary. However, I think that in the original concept in the bylaws that were under discussion prior to this meeting, the board felt that the secretary's duty would be to maintain the minutes and records of these proceedings. I think that's probably, generally speaking, what secretaries of bodies, public or private, do. I think that for our purposes, the main duty is the retention of the meeting minutes, along with facilitating the publishing of those minutes. The laws do not require that they be done in any particular manner, only that they are done and that they reflect the business that was conducted, most especially if there are any votes undertaken or any matters of public business. So the secretary serves a very crucial function that you could suppose look at it this way. It's the person tasked with the public presentation of our work. I mean, obviously we have an open meeting, we have a live stream meeting, but if you're not here in person, the only record you're going to have would be whatever the secretary produces that reflects the business that was conducted here. Already, we've had the election of 2 officers, and so our meeting minutes after today's meeting should reflect that. And that's what, not to presume to speak for you as a board, but my sense reading your prior efforts at creating bylaws was that that would be the primary duty of the secretary, to memorialize the actions that we take at these meetings. Have I answered your question, President Adams?
So it's not so much as to actually taking notes, but more so maintaining and preserving them.
That's a fair way of putting it. I mean, practically speaking, you probably do have to take notes, but if you can see what I'm doing, I'm simultaneously marking up my agenda and also taking my own more detailed notes.
One of the questions people might have now, is this being recorded?
I'm sorry?
Is all of this being recorded?
I do not know the answer to that. I would ask Ms. Jackson McLean, since she's been administering the virtual meeting. Are we recording these sessions?
We are.
Okay, very well. And I think that's consistent with what the Common Council does, as well as what other boards that or public bodies I'm familiar with that live stream, they also do record them. I think pragmatically, the secretary would do something similar to what I'm doing here, which is with respect to these agenda items, I've noted the movement, the second, and the result of the vote. So for example, the board chairman or chairperson, excuse me, board member Ash moved to nominate President Adams. It was seconded by Board Member Johnson, and by unanimous vote, President Johnson was elected. So the secretary is certainly within his or her discretion to decide how much detail beyond that he or she would like to include. My recommendation is that minimally we record the actions taken and the results. So that's my, in a nutshell, job description for the secretary. I'm happy to work with anybody offline about the more practical aspects about, well, where, the minutes are going to be something you're going to record in a Word document. Where does that document go? Who in the city administration is going to publish that on the website? But I don't think this is anything beyond our ability to do. So if I've answered all the board members' questions, I would ask that we have a nomination for secretary or volunteer, if somebody wants to volunteer to take that role on.
Would volunteer with assistance until I get the hang
I'll-
of doing it.
I'll be willing to volunteer for the secretary.
So we have two, I guess we have two candidates. Was that Ms. Williams speaking?
That was.
Okay, so we have Ms. Williams and we have Ms. Webster. Do we have a second for either?
I am going to second Miss Williams.
Well, we have a nomination and a second. Is there a second for Ms. Webster?
I will second this one.
Well, so we have something to vote on here because we have two nominations in 2 seconds. I would ask that we do this in a roll call fashion so we can record the vote. The motion to nominate Ms. Williams was seconded first, so let's take that one up. Let's do a roll call here. Ms. Williams, on the motion to appoint you board secretary, how do you vote? Did you hear me, ma'am?
Yes, I'm here.
Could you vote yes or no on the motion to appoint you board secretary?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Thomas, yes or no?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson, yes or no?
Yes.
Ms. Webster, yes or no? President Adams, yes or no?
Yes.
And then Member Ash, yes or no? All right, well, a funny thing happened. We had a unanimous vote on the first motion, including you, Member Webster, who was a candidate for office. So by unanimous vote, Ms. Williams has been appointed board secretary.
Thank you for your service.
And thank you, Ms. Webster, for your willingness to volunteer, although I got the sense it was with some deal of reluctance, and by voting against yourself, you seem to have been somewhat relieved not to get the position. But here we are. We have a recap. We have for board president or chairperson, we have Mr. Adams. For vice president or vice chair, we have Ms. Thomas. And then for secretary, we have Secretary Williams. I'm happy to stand down. I think that this is not the most orthodox way of doing it. I don't, as your counsel, I don't want to ever be perceived as acting as some sort of super board member who conducts your meetings for you, but not having board officers until now, I thought it was the most effective way to do this. I think at this point, we'll turn the meeting back to the chair and carry on with our agenda, which I now have us on item 4.
Thank you, Counselor. We are now at item 4, adoption of the bylaws. In a moment, I'm going to move to table the adoption of the bylaws until we have a revised bylaws that work. But before I do that, I would like to open up for some discussion on how to accomplish that goal. So I believe that there is a suggestion that we could form a committee to get that done, or we could just have me work with the counselor to come up with some bylaws that incorporate all of the suggestions that we've made over the last few months to present back to this body. So, but I want to open that up to some discussion to hear from you all.
That point of order, I think that's probably a good idea to have a formal motion to table the agenda item 4 until the March meeting with a second, and then we can have discussion on the motion before we vote on it. So I'm hearing that we have a motion to table agenda item 4 and then a second. So I think at this point, Chairman Adams, you can open it up for discussion.
Well, I had a question. Have you had a chance as the attorney to look at these? And then give input back?
I
did, right?
I did. I circulated an opinion letter
Right.
a week ago on short notice. And then I had a conversation with Chairman Adams where he provided me the history of the efforts to produce these bylaws. Legally speaking, my opinion would be it'd be better to not take action on them this evening when you're still uncertain about what I suppose the areas in which your bylaws may be consistent with the enabling ordinance or inconsistent. So I shared my opinion. It's in confidence because you are my clients. But I think that the result of it would be I think you all know that I was not the author of these bylaws. I've had 2 or 3 weeks to come up to speed on them and to get the historical sense of what the intent was. I just think we'll craft a better version if we slow things down a little bit and work.
The reason I was asking is, it seems to me it would be nice to meet with you to go a little bit more in depth about the areas, that you raised in the email we all got.
Mhm.
And then talk a little bit more about that and explaining why, I'm gonna be quite honest, it was a little bit very legally for me. Okay, and I understood parts of it. And then I understood parts that I'm not sure if I really understood. Okay. But I was knowing that we were going to have this meeting. I was going to suggest that we have just a meeting on the bylaws with us and you go through, parts that you like, parts that you didn't, which it already did, but for making any sense, I just need a little more
Absolutely.
explanation, explaining what.
I think that's a good way to approach it. If I'm tasked with being the main author of the bylaws,
Right.
I don't intend to present them in a way that here they are, you have half an hour to read them before we vote. I'd like to make it a more collaborative process. And I think I'm certainly happy to have a phone call with you, have a cup of coffee with you.
I like to do it as a group though.
Okay.
I don't
So
know how anybody else feels, because you might ask the question, Cominique, that I would have never thought of. And so if we could, do it as a group.
the only issue there is that, whenever we have a group of public officials meeting, we have to make sure that we're following the open door laws.
Right.
So certainly meeting with your attorney to discuss fundamental functions of the board I think that's an area where you're entitled to have some confidence and some privacy. But I'd want to make sure that we don't accidentally create a meeting that should be open to the public. I think that it might be better, at least to start, to have a little one-on-one discussion.
Okay.
But I'm sensitive to it. My goal in this is, well, I'll say this. There's the enabling ordinance that created this board and empowered this board. The bylaws are not necessary for you to carry out your duties.
Mhm.
So if it takes a couple meetings or phone calls to have bylaws that everyone's happy with, I'm fine with that. Because without them, we can still carry on the core functions that the Common Council asked us to do. So I would be happy to approach it that way. I mean, I'd be happy to speak individually with any board member if we can find if we feel that there's an exception to the open door laws and we give enough notice that we are meeting in executive session, I'm happy to do that. But I don't think it's going to stand in the way of progress, because I think the enabling ordinance already sets out our mission and our powers and duties. So I'll stop speaking and turn it back to you. And I hope I've answered your question.
So basically, you would meet individually with us. And then if you thought there was a reason to have, the whole group meet, you would investigate how it deals with the open door law.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. How do you guys feel?
I think that's fair. I think it's appropriate to do, since we don't want to violate the
Right.
open door law. I think this is the way that we should do it. Those of us who would like to meet with the attorney could make that appointment. And then from there, whatever comes out of the bylaws, if we need to have one of our meetings and it's presented at the meeting with the open door policy, I think that's appropriate.
Okay. So, what our goal is to get a revised copy of the bylaws that have incorporated all of the past concerns and requests of all of the members, so that we can open it up for voting and discussion and go from there. And we want to set a target date of next meeting. Is that okay with you, Counselor?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so we'll set a target date of next meeting for that. So that was our discussion. Now it's time to take a vote on tabling that until next meeting. So is there a second?
I'll
Okay,
say, oh,
Luella is our second member, Luella.
okay.
So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. We're moving on to the next item, which is the director's report.
So we're gonna table 1, 2, and 3. We're tabling 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so electronic.
Action. Is that okay with you? Good. All right, so we're moving on to item 5, the director's report.
Right.
So at this point, I'm going to yield to Director King.
All right, thank you, and President, and it's so good to have officially appointed officials of this board. It's taken a while, but I'm glad that we've hit this point. So a quick update from 2025. We're really at the beginning of this year still, so I haven't had a lot of cases come through yet or complaints, but I've had two. So right now, we have one that alleges improper seizure, and we also have another one that was unfounded. The first complaint was forwarded to the police department, and now that we're officially aboard, we have to talk about procedures on how to get that case before you. As far as community engagements this year, I've done the mobile office Friday. My first mobile office Friday was at Linden Grill. We went there and I was there for 3 hours. I engaged with over 35 citizens in the city. My next mobile office Friday will be at the Chocolate Cafe. It'll be after hours so I can have more of engagement after 6 p.m. We also have a Faith Leaders Summit that is coming on February 28th. Well, we'll engage with pastors and local clergy. I've also opened that up to community leaders as well. So there's right now right around 20 people committed to that gathering. Upcoming events, I kind of alluded about the mobile office Friday that is coming in not this month, but in March. And that will be at the South Bend Chocolate Cafe, as well as the Faith Leaders Summit, which is in the fall. We'll have an additional one. It will coincide with the Citizens of Police Academy, and we'll try to get more people signed up for that police academy there. Did anybody have any questions? It's exactly the same. There's some clergy members that identified they didn't know about it, and that meeting will help them be aware of it.
Did you have a location for the Faith Leaders Summit?
Yes, it's going to be at Life Changers Church on the 28th. I can provide an address for that once we leave. Any other questions? All right, if not, I'm going to yield the floor back to President Adams.
Director, it seems that your annual report has been published. Is that true?
It has not.
On that annual report, you're planning to, how to do, what word am I looking for? To disseminate it. How are you planning to do that?
It has to be presented to the Common Council, which that will be done on the 24th of this month.
Okay, so is that what you meant by it has not, because it hasn't been presented to the council?
Right.
Although,
And then you could, after they've seen it and did whatever they have to do, you could then disseminate it.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, while we were on the director's report and talking about, kind of how we're gonna let the community know about this board and I'd like to make a suggestion that maybe we have a small committee that basically would kind of help think of places, help work with you to think of places to go to, like where can we go to in the Hispanic community?
Mhm.
How do we maybe make sure that the Hispanic community has information in Spanish about this, review board, et cetera.
Mhm.
Um, Do we want to look at getting this information out to what I call special populations, like the deaf or the blind, or how might we target elderly people to make sure they have information? So I would like to see, small group get together and say, okay, here are some places you can go for the mobile office Friday. And then look at how we're going to get this information out to what I call special populations.
So again, Director, when did you say your meeting was with the council?
It is Monday, the 24th.
Okay, and in preparation for it, there is the, what you put together and filed in the clerk's office. Could you pass this down so that everybody can get a chance to take a look at it?
I think everybody should have a copy of it. If you don't, I have some extras.
But you already provided a copy of it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
So then,
Because you emailed that to us.
Yes.
okay. So I appreciate, the board appreciates all of the initiative that the review office have taken and everything that they've had to, do with while the board was, meeting its training requirements. And I would like you to speak to, what processes you intend to immediately implement now that the board is ready to go to hear cases. While you're preparing to respond to me, Counselor, if I'm not mistaken, the board has a responsibility to decide which cases merit further investigation. And so that makes me think that there is a report at least twice upon the initial complaint and after the findings. And so after the director gets done responding, Counselor, I'm going to ask you to let me know if that's correct, if that idea is correct.
Okay. So as far as the initial getting cases, we have to first off identify policies and procedures. That's one of the things that we're going to have in place because we have to first figure out how we disseminate the information. Right now, we have a loose way of doing that going through your council, Mr. Masters, Councilor Masters, and that information would then be disseminated to you. I obviously have a counsel on my side of the office too, that I would forward information to her and then she gets it to Councilor Masters. So that is the initial process. Now, we have to identify ways to make that fully functional because we don't want to disclose citizens' information or police officers' information to put them in an awkward situation. So we'll make sure we have that policy in place, but I foresee that being in place as soon as our next meeting or even before our next meeting, depending on how council can quickly approve something to put something in place there. Any other questions about how we disseminate the information?
Give me a moment to respond. I want to make sure that we are on the right track. Council, are you ready to respond?
Thank you. I'll tell you, I'm just referencing the ordinance. In broad strokes, the review board are the judges of the complaints. Not the investigators, not the prosecutors, but the judges of the complaints that are referred to the board after the review office, which is Director King's function and the police department's internal affairs agency conduct their inquiry. But more, I guess, in a finer point, I think the first question concerns the intake process, because the enabling ordinance states that the review board shall meet to consider all complaints which it deems appropriate to process and review. So the board serves, I suppose, its first duty as an intake agent to receive complaints. Now, that's not really the only way to file a complaint. In fact, the review office it welcomes complaining parties to submit complaints to the review office.
Now, is the review office headed by,
Yes, so Director
the-
King is the
okay.
director of the review office.
okay, I want to make sure I'm getting the correct people.
You're exactly right. So the review office is, Director King is the director of the review, excuse me, of the review office.
Okay.
I think that maybe the best way to do it is with an example. So we have a complaining party who wishes to make a complaint for this board to consider. The ordinance states that this board could serve as an intake body because the ordinance says that you can meet to consider complaints which you deem appropriate to process and review. The review office also has an intake function. So a citizen could go to the office and submit a complaint directly to Director King. That's the first step. Second step is what now happens to a complaint, whether it's been filed with the board or filed with the office. Well, the ordinance says that all complaints shall, and when the word shall appears in legislation, it's mandatory, not discretionary. So all complaints shall be referred to the police department's internal affairs division for an investigation. That's one investigation. But the review office shall conduct a concurrent investigation, which is the second investigation, and work in collaboration with internal affairs. So first step is intake. If it comes here or if it comes to Director King, we receive a complaint. The second step is review. The board is not directly involved in the review process. The review process is conducted jointly and separately by the review office led by Pastor King and the police department's internal affairs division. Now, where the board serves, I think its broadest function is after the review process is finished. So we've received a complaint, or the review office has received a complaint. We've referred that to the police department, who've opened an investigation, and Pastor King has opened a concurrent investigation. Pastor King and the police department have finished their investigations. They then will refer the results of their investigation to this board. And that judge function, that's when that function begins. Because once this board has received the results of an investigation done by the police and the review office, you then have the options to further investigate, conduct a hearing, or direct the director, Pastor King, to engage in a mediation process. So I think the intent of this legislation is to separate the review and investigation function from the deliberative function. This board exercises the deliberative function. So you will review and then take action on complaints that have been investigated by Pastor King and the police. Am I making sense so far?
Yeah.
Okay. Can I answer anything else?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, so let's say we get now, will we get a report from Internal Affairs plus the director. But there'll be two separate reports, won't they?
It can be,
They
yeah.
might say the same thing.
Right. Does that, yes. I mean, practically speaking, the ordinance says, well, it says this. All complaints shall be referred to internal affairs for investigation.
Okay, and
The review office shall conduct a concurrent investigation and work in collaboration with internal affairs. Department, meaning the police department investigations, shall be completed within 60 days. Then return to the review office. So yes, I mean, when the ordinance says concurrent but collaboratively, I think it is possible that you could receive two reports. You could receive the one from internal affairs, and then you could receive the one that the review office did. It's also possible you may only receive one report if the result of the collaboration is the review office and internal affairs agreed. I think that might be more, practically speaking, might be more of what we can expect, because ultimately some investigation has to be closed and then returned here for the board to review. And I'm not sure it makes sense to expect that we would receive competing reports as opposed to one report. Internal Affairs concludes its report, delivers it to the review office, and then the review office delivers that to the board. Now, the ordinance does require the review office to do a concurrent investigation, but I think in terms of the product that you're going to see, I think the concept here is one report investigated by both agencies so that you're only really taking up one item.
But how, I guess I'm wondering if there were disagreements, okay, and how are we gonna know that? You know,
Well,
I mean,
so
there'll
the-
be times, yes, they'll agree,
right.
but I guess I would like to know. I actually would like, even if it's kind of a repetitive report, I myself would like a report that I know what the director, how he viewed it, and then how internal affairs viewed it.
Right. So I'll just respond to that, but the best thing I can do is stick to the language of the ordinance. And what the ordinance talks about is the police chief taking some action or making some recommendation.
Mm.
And that report coming to this board to review.
Mm.
So I think that it's possible you could see a report investigated both by the office under Pastor King and internal affairs. That's one report in which the police chief is recommending a certain action, but the review office is indicating a disagreement. It's the chief's recommendation that the ordinance says you're supposed to review. So you may, hypothetically, I mean, reasonable people can disagree. It may be that the report comes to you and it's the report from the chief of police after internal affairs has done its investigation and the chief of police is recommending a certain action. And we have with it our concurrent report that says we agree or we respectfully disagree. But I think the product that you're going to be reviewing is the one report and the one recommendation from the chief. So it is a bit, it's one of those things I think we'll all understand in a much richer way when we actually see it. And part of the issue is we haven't seen this, right? We haven't had a report referred to us from internal affairs or the review office. But what I'm envisioning, at least literally reading the language of the ordinance, is Pastor King and his office and internal affairs are doing twin investigations in collaboration, but they're not necessarily required to agree. However, what the ordinance asks this board to review is to quote the specific language, the action taken or recommended by the chief of police or the investigation conducted by the police department. So I think that it is possible there could be disagreement. It's just as possible there could be agreement. But what matters for our purposes is what is internal affairs through the chief of police recommending be done? And do we as a board agree with that or disagree or want further investigation? So when I say to think of yourself as judges, that's what you're going to be judging. Is this collaborative report, but ultimately you're judging sort of the end result of that, which is a recommendation from law enforcement on how to resolve the issue. And I don't mean to speak for him, but I think that
That's right.
Director King, have I met
Yeah.
your expectations on how you thought we would handle it?
That's correct.
Okay.
Only thing I could add is that once the investigation is started, that we'll pull a panel of people together. One of those panel members could be President Adams. So President Adams, myself, and my legal counsel, Counselor McLean. So we could all go to that initial viewing of evidence together, and we'd have something to work with as we're investigating and carrying out the review. Okay.
So my next question is, will there be a point where I know I've looked at things and then I've said, well, I have a question here. Does that happen?
So as council has indicated to us, we will deliberate the findings. Until now, we've not been given any findings to deliberate. Right now, we are questioning the director over how soon we will be given findings so that this board can do its job.
Yeah. So there's one for this year that has been submitted to the police department. The other one was unfounded. It didn't have any credible evidence once I investigated it. I'd be willing to disclose that information, in a private session as well, or executive session, I should say. As well as last year, which is obviously going to come up, we had 16 complaints. 6 of them were forwarded to the police. And of those 6 complaints, we were unable to deliberate or do any adjudication on our side because we had to get through the training. So I would have to talk to my legal counsel to see how that's going to play out. Do we backtrack to those 2024 cases, which is kind of a conundrum for everybody because we're past their 60-day window. So we'd have to really talk to legal and see how that works out.
And I
Yeah.
can weigh in on, as the director's attorney during his report, if that's all right with President Adams.
Please.
So the intent is to, well, the director and I are actually going to be meeting shortly after this meeting. Now that you're official and ready to take those on the best way to present them. So a lot of the other boards that I work with do a kind of a hearing process where there's a presentation. You will have access to the evidence in advance through the process that the director mentioned, where he'll kind of send it to me, I'll send it to your council, and it'll be living on some OneDrive or SharePoint that you all have access to. So you can look at it in advance, make your notes, decide what you want, and then at future meetings, as early as we're able, so potentially in March, the director will stand up in front of you and present each case. And then once those cases are presented, you'll be able to already have had the materials, and then you'll be able to deliberate on the record. The portion that could potentially be an executive session is if there are questions that would include citizens' personal information, social security numbers, birth dates, any personally identifying information, but then you would come back from that to deliberate on the record. So as soon as possible, we would like to go ahead and start uploading information to the server that you'll have access to, and then get hearings, so to speak, on the agenda.
So could as soon as possible mean within the next month?
It could, yes. And that just depends on getting the evidence to your council, getting the SharePoint to you, and if you guys feel ready, you've had enough time to review that evidence, then through collaboration on the agenda, we could agree to put that on the agenda for March.
This board would like counsel, I just want to make sure we're on the same page, but we would like to create a standing agenda item for Director King to be able to make these presentations, anticipating that the first one will come by next meeting. Is that good with everyone? That's good with you all? Y'all ready to work?
Agree with that.
One thing I would be interested in, on the ones that are not founded as being valid, I just would like to know, and it might be like a 2-sentence thing, but why were they not valid? Now, just to say they're not valid, fine, but they're not valid because the person refused to come in and tell what happened. They're not valid because the person lives in Michigan. That's all I'm saying. I'd like to know that.
So you're asking for clarification on why they were unfounded?
Well, no, if I understand right, there will be some that you will choose not to investigate for a variety of reasons.
Mhm.
I just want to know what those reasons were that you chose not to investigate. Does that make
I
any
think-
sense?
I think that could be in any future director's reports going
Yeah.
forward and then those would already be standing items. But then you could question the director once you see them in his report.
Okay. So Director, you've heard the concerns of Member Cheryl. Is that something that you could include in your report?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Counselor, this standing agenda item, is this something the board should move on? Or do we just do a good faith request?
Well, I think that, is the idea to have a monthly, at least a monthly director's report?
That is specific to giving us something to deliberate on.
Okay. So I guess the only possible hangup there would be if the complaints are not complete. So it is the ordinance allows the police department to request an extension of time. So you could certainly move that be a portion of the director's report. However, the only problem we'd run into is it wouldn't be, I mean, it would sort of lose its meaning if he has to report to us that we don't have any complaints to investigate. Another way of doing it, I suppose, would be, that it be I guess, sort of a standing new business item, that if there are any, complaints to refer to the board, that we take them up each month under new business. So rather than tying it, I guess, rather than specifying in the director's report, you have to tell us which ones are we ready to do. You could decide that as part of the new business you wish to take up at next month's meeting or every meeting would be, review of complaints ready for adjudication. I don't think you necessarily need a motion to do that because you can set the agenda. Or you can, I think that, well, Pastor King would set the agenda, I mean, in collaboration with us. I don't think it harms anything if you want to move, I guess, offer a motion that as future matters of new business, item 1 is always review of new complaints. But I don't think it's strictly necessary either.
Now, okay. You're talking about review of new complaint.
Yeah.
You're not talking actually about listening to the I don't know what word I want to use. But we'd be in an open meeting, right?
Right.
So we're not gonna actually hear what the report was about though, about that. It would just be, we had complaint A, and whatever you want to say about complaint A, and we had complaint B, but we're not going to actually hear the evidence or anything else, because it's an open meeting.
I'm not sure I necessarily agree. I think that, so what the ordinance asks you to do is decide whether you wish there to be further investigation,
Okay.
whether you wish to have a hearing on the complaint, or whether you wish to have the director engage in mediation with the interested parties.
So what will we hear at an open session?
I think you would very likely hear anything that was not protected personal information.
Okay, we hear the person's name.
They can choose to report it anonymously. I think that there may be some discretion used in this room on how we speak about the complaining party, but I think that you could expect in the report to receive enough identifying information for it to be
Will we,
sensible.
will we receive information about sex, race, age?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I think that bodies have to be somewhat circumspect about asking those questions. But I think that it may be, if it's, if it's germane to the issue, if the gravamen of the complaint is I was treated differently because of my race,
Right.
it may be relevant to that complaint. I don't think, though, that anybody wants to set up a process where we're, as part of a form, we're asking people to identify themselves by a particular racial characteristic. I think that it would come up if it were relevant in the context of the complaint. But I think you would expect to hear enough details that you can make one of these 3 decisions. Because one of the decisions, and I want to go back to a question you asked earlier about asking questions. One of the options that you would be voting on, let's say next month we have a completed investigation. Internal Affairs has finished it. They've given it to Director King. Director King stands before you and says, complaint number 1 alleged this. Recommendation from the police department is that the person undergo a training session. One of the options that you could vote on is to ask Director King to do a further investigation. So I think you'd have to receive enough information to make a cogent decision. You also have the option of setting it for a hearing. And if there is a hearing, there'll be live testimony. There'll be evidence received. There'll be people that have the option of appearing with attorneys. So I don't think that we're a public body. We're doing public business. I think you'll receive all the details that we can publicly disclose. We're not, I wouldn't want to have people's social security numbers published or things like that, but I think you have to do enough. You have to receive enough information from Director King that you can do your work intelligently. Okay. And you have to make these 3 decisions, or one of these 3 decisions. And if one of them is to investigate further, well, it may be because you want to know, was there some sort of racial component to this that needs to be investigated further? Was, as you said, was the complaining person, not even in South Bend at the time because they live out of state, something like that. But I think that we have to respect the fact that we're doing the public's business, and we're going to have to do it publicly, subject to some of the protections we do have in place, that people can proceed anonymously. But I think you have to have enough information from the review office to make an intelligent decision.
Sharia, are you with me?
Yes, I'm still here. I'm present.
All right, Counselor, will you please help me prepare for a motion? Board, under the director's report, there are 3 items, and neither of them is the information that we need to do our business. I'm about to move that we permanently include that item. We permanently request that item.
Okay. Say what that item is.
The counselor is preparing.
Well, so I think that you could ask Director King, as part of his ongoing director's report, which is going to be a regular agenda item, to report to you or to present to you complaints that are ready for deliberation. I guess to put it that way, that the motion would be that the board directs Director King to include in his report a presentation of all complaints ready for review by the board. And if the answer is there are none, then he can tell us that. But I understand what I think the sense of this is you want those items to come before the board. And you could do that by saying you make it a new business item every month. Or you could say, well, let's include it in the director's report. I think it would still get taken up probably under new business. But I don't think that it would, and I don't think any harm would come if you asked that on a monthly basis or however regularly we meet, that Director King also report which complaints that his office has received are ready for review. So I suppose the motion would be to ask the director to include in his report a presentation of the complaints that are ready for review.
That's moved. Is there a second?
I second.
We have a second. Is there any? Is there any discussion?
Well, you know,
That was a live mic that was immediately muted.
Okay.
Wow.
This board is ready to go. All right, let's go for a vote. Should this be a all or a roll call vote?
You can do an aye or a or nay or a aye or nay, and we'll just see. If we can't determine the vote, we'll do a roll call.
Okay. All in favor of this inclusion, this request, this direction to the director, the motion that you all heard, may we hear an aye?
Aye.
Are there any nays? And the ayes have it.
So just, I mean, not to interrupt, but I think the idea here would be with Director King's report, include a component of the reports that are ready for this body to consider. And it may very well be that what we do in terms of setting the agenda is when Director King reports to us, these are ready for review, we will include them on the agenda in advance under new business. But I think I take the point here, which is we want to be proactive about staying on top of our review of these complaints.
And I believe that this board doesn't mind the review office determining how best to get that information to us. But this board would like to have it in writing of that request, ready to work. So we've responded to the case statistics, the community engagement activities. Are there any more questions to the director in regards to community engagement activities? Or upcoming initiatives? Okay, This meeting that you have scheduled with council, was this requested by council?
It was, yeah. Every year I have to do an annual report, and I submit that annual report to several bodies in the city. The Common Council is one of them, and they requested that I would show for one of the Common Council meetings and review my annual report with them.
Are you intending on speaking about our 3 vacancies?
Yes, I am. And I'm also going to speak about our election of officers and the progress that we've made through training and that sort.
Um, I've always imagined, Counselor, that this board would, in a sense, move to send this information to the council that we're missing these members or that they've not met the attendance requirements, almost like sending a director there with a note from the board, as opposed to having him go without any proof that, he's been working with us. I read through the ordinance a little bit earlier, and I do see that there are some requirements in regards to taking care of that, but I just don't know. I'm asking you, what should we do? Should we send them with a note or?
Well, I don't think we can take any action because we don't have the agenda item here to vote on. But I think that, since we're still in the director's report and we're having our discussion with the director, I think that certainly, all the board members are appointed by the Common Council. I don't know how aware the council is about the activities of this board. I mean, we have a board of 9. We have 6 members participating, which is just 1 member over what we need for a quorum. So I don't think we can take up any type of motion to direct the director to report something or other, because we don't have, we haven't presented that on our agenda. But I do think that it's certainly this function of the back and forth with the director. I think you can certainly express to the director that it's an issue for this board, and it may be something we might want to set an agenda item for our next month meeting to
It can't come under new business?
Thank you.
I not without having published it first. I would say, I think it's better, since we're still in the director's report part of the
Yeah.
matter, right? So I think that it's better for us to advise our director while he's in our presence, and since he's reporting to the Common Council, that we have a concern as a board about the composition of the board. There's the related issue of board member terms.
Not showing up.
Well, I think that, I think for our purposes tonight, what we probably should stick with is, since this is in the director's report, it's something we're expressing to the
Right.
director, knowing that he's going to meet to the Common Council.
After just find it.
If you'd like to put it as a new item or item of new business for our next meeting, to review the board composition, to review the member terms, we could take it up then.
Let me ask you this question. Is there anything anywhere that says how many meetings you can miss? I mean, most of the things I've ever been involved in, there's something that says you can only miss so many meetings.
I'm gonna take back the floor for a second. There is something,
Okay.
Yes, it's very clear inside of the ordinance, and we'll reinforce it with the bylaws at the next one. Also included in the bylaws, I want to prepare the director. How are you preparing to respond? How is the office preparing to respond to the 60-day requirement that the members who are missing are supposed to?
Are you referring to the people that are on the board that have missed their meetings?
Yeah, the 60-day notice that they're supposed to get.
I've had two of them verbally give me notice that they just couldn't participate. I still need to talk to a third member,
So
and
you
get
ready
a
to go?
formal agreement that he can't be on the board, but we'll get that this week.
So, okay, so by your estimate, you don't expect council to be able to take that up immediately? You think they may send you back to go get something, or are you expecting them to take this up immediately?
I'm not sure the language of the ordinance, it gives them 45 days, but who's holding them accountable to that? So it's not our board. So I've put forward emails and talked to the common council, the common council president as well. So pushing to get these people on this board so we're not at a loss. So that conversation has started and it will continue on the 24th.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that no one is confused, the reason why I'm asking these questions is because although we do have a quorum, I am very much interested in operating at and how we operate at the full capacity that council intended. So
Right.
trying to be proactive.
They're waiting to see if some other people were coming to try to get a form. But I just want to avoid that in the future.
Okay. You are heard, Member Cheryl. All right, I'm gonna let the director breathe if no one has any more questions. Okay. So we are going to officially close out that item and move over to 6, board training session, which I believe has definitely happened here. This is what we're gonna do for this portion of the item. We're going to give the members an opportunity to just ask a specific question that they may have. And council, you will respond as you deem fit, including requesting getting back to us by next meeting. Because we've been here for an hour now. And so I'm trying to see how we can take care of the public's business and get out. We'll start with Member Cheryl.
About understanding the role of community, police review boards, legal structure, all that. Is there's gonna be a separate meeting about that, I know. But has that been flushed out, like a possible date, or who's gonna do it?
Just to add on to Member Cheryl, do you have a specific question, maybe even more to what you've already said?
I just want to know, are they in the process of planning that now?
Yeah, we're doing it right now. So
Okay, have they picked the date for this?
today is the date, Member Cheryl. What would you like
Here.
to? Today is the date. We're doing it right now. What would you like to know?
Well, for me, I think it's got to be longer than this. I would want longer than this.
Okay, so you would like a longer meeting?
I would like a separate meeting where this topic will be talking about legal framework and authority, oversight, best practices, and community relations. To me, this needs to be kind of a workshop meeting.
Okay, requesting a workshop.
Well, I got one other one.
Member Sharia,
Present.
what questions do you have in regards to training, this training section?
As far as training, the question I would have is record that we have access to record of everyone's training that's visible to us, so we know where each member stand.
Are you understanding what she's saying, Counselor?
I think the question relates to the mandatory training that all board members have to go through, and I think that's a basic issue of your qualifications to serve as board members. I'd like to give some thought to how we document that.
Mhm.
It's the members of this board can only be removed by the common council. So we cannot remove each other. And so if we have a sense that a member is not doing the training, it falls on the common council to supervise that. So I understand the issue is all of you have to do this training.
I'm not talking about mandatory training. I'm talking about
Yes,
training to help us do a better job.
Oh, no, he's responding to Member Sharia's question.
I think we're asking two different questions.
Yeah.
So yes, I think the question relates to who is the keeper of the documentation that we've been through our training. I would have to give some thought to that because it's the policemen, so to speak, for your qualifications are the members of the common council. I don't want to answer your question with a question,
So
but
you'll think about it.
who have the board been reporting to? Because I know you had to do this.
So far, the director's office have been keeping up. But this question also came from the elected secretary, so I think that's fun.
No, I think it's something I'd like to give some thought to because there is an obligation to do the training. The ordinance is silent on who supervises that and who ensures that you are doing your training. My instinctual answer would be that because the common council appoints the members of this board and can remove them, the common council has the implicit duty to ensure that you are qualified, which would also include ensuring that you've met your training. But the common council's not, I mean, it's, in a sense, it's an inanimate object because it's a group of individuals. So the question is, to whom, what flesh and blood human beings should we be reporting our training? You've explained to me that by default, it's been going to the review office, and maybe that's fine. I guess I'd like to speak further with Pastor King and his attorney to come to a better understanding of if our members are doing this training and our members have to maintain their qualifications, who do we tell I've done my ride-alongs, I've done my training? And for right now, it's been Pastor King, and that may be just fine, but I'd like to put some thought into a better answer than that.
Thank you, Counselor. For the remainder of the meeting, could you keep your responses brief?
Of course.
Member Luella, what specific questions do you have?
I guess as far as training, we have to go through the Citizen Police Academy. And I guess I want some clarification as to whether or not the chief says we have to do the academy first. And in the articles, it had said that we had to do the ride along. So there's no clarification. I think some type of clarification needs to be made to that. And it would have to probably be a decision with the chief and the director as to how, when someone is appointed to the board, or we're going through our training that's mandatory for the 12 hours that we have to do we do it before we go to the academy? Are we allowed to do that so that we can become official? Then go to the academy afterwards. Is that clear?
Well, the problem, like Luella, is they only offer this police citizens academy twice a year. So let's say you're appointed after they've had the academy. Does that mean the person has to wait how many months? Because the police say you have to go to the academy before you can do the ride along, but the only thing in the ordinance is the ride along.
I understand your point, and it's something I understand the issue. There's a minimum mandatory training, but in a practical sense, you're doing additional training beyond that.
Because police require it to do the minimum training.
I don't know if it's something we can answer tonight. I think it's going to require a discussion with a lot of stakeholders, including the Common Council who wrote this ordinance and the police department. But I do understand the issue because it could prevent you from doing the mandatory training or doing it in a timely manner. So I've noted it as something that needs further further investigation.
Member Monique,
I would just request that when that information becomes available, that if we could get that documented on a separate sheet with just those items, those line items, and in the order in which they should flow,
which information are you referring to, Madam Monique?
the training.
Okay. Member Kelly?
So in the suggestions or recommendations, I'm looking at a couple different things. I'm looking at the fact that the training in one document, I think the original bylaws say that it's recommended that we have additional training, such as the how police handle complaints, viewing previous cases and watching videos of misconduct, conflict resolution, and there were a couple of others mentioned. So the original bylaws, I believe, stated that they were recommended, and now I'm seeing that it may be required. So is that something that the Common Council would decide? Would we decide that when revising the bylaws? Who sets forth if it's recommended or if it's required? And should it be required, where would those trainings be offered and who would be financially responsible for those trainings?
Are you okay, Member Kelly, with getting a response next meeting?
Perfect.
Okay. Counselor, we will request that you conduct the board training session that will be on the agenda for next meeting. Is that all right?
Absolutely.
Without objection, that concludes. Okay, we have a question.
Resolution 01-2024, is that something that we need to act on? It's about attending meetings electronically. Shouldn't that be something that we look at? So we know exactly that we quote legally, okay, said what the requirements are to attend electronically? You know what I'm talking about?
Mr. Masters, I can help with that if you'd like. I drafted that document.
Thank you.
So that is something that is specific to the open door law. The city already had a template drawn up from all the other boards. And so I provided a copy of it. It should be in the packet. This was my draft. I mean, you are free to deal with it however you see fit, but it is at least the city attorney's office position that, yes, you should probably address this because it is a requirement of state law that there be a policy on the books.
Oh.
But this is already a policy on the books.
There is not a policy adopted by this board.
Not
So
yet.
we eventually have to adopt is talking about attending this meeting electronically. We need to have a policy and adopt it, right? So we need to do that next time, or are we doing it this time?
Well, if I could interrupt with a point of order, it is on your agenda. You could elect to take it up. It was, it was encompassed in the agenda item under adoption of bylaws, which was tabled until next month. However,
This is not violent.
right, you could separate this and you could take a vote on just adopting the electronic meeting resolution. That's unaffected by whatever changes you may make to your bylaws. It so happens that we have a physical quorum this evening, so it's not an issue for tonight's meeting. But you certainly could, you could take it up and vote on it. And I think we are almost at new business. So if you wanted to wait until that agenda item, you could take a vote on this resolution. It was agenda, I mean, it was not to, make up a word, but it was agended, so there was notice that this would come before the board. You could take that up tonight.
Okay, without objection, we're going to conclude item 6, the board training session. And as far as old business, Director, is there anything for that?
It's in this report, the 2024 update. Just wanted to make sure you guys had it and you could see where the cases, when they came in throughout the year and how many we received. As we get further into the summer months, you guys are going to see an uptick in, just based on what I've seen from last year, you're going to see an uptick in cases that will come from our office.
And so I just want to remind the board before we open it up for questions that our response is deliberation on those cases that meet the criteria to be deliberated on. And that is not what he is presenting to us right now. Is that correct, Director?
No, I'm not deliberating anything there. It's going to have to be taken up with council, and we're going to have to look at the adjudications from the police department
All right.
because we're well past their date on some of them.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that this board understands. Just want to reiterate what our council have shared with us, what our response is and what triggers that response. So now, are there any questions for this agenda item? Presented to us. All right, seems that we're all good to go. So we are going to move on from 7 and move to 8, new business, proposed meeting schedule. All right, we'll take a moment to look at this schedule, and I will open the floor for any questions and concerns in regards to the proposed meeting schedule.
Assumption that Thursday, November 20th is not Thanksgiving, correct? I don't have my calendar with me. Okay, fine.
All right. So Thursdays, this schedule works good. I know that there were a lot of collaboration in making this schedule, and we're all still good to go. Okay.
Pardon me, member Ash, before you move on to that, could you vote on the meeting schedule? just because it is an item of new business, so it would require a vote.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I think it would be most appropriate for member Cheryl to move for this because she was persistent in making sure we get our dates together and published.
2025.
I second. We'll go for a vote. All in favor with their ayes.
Aye.
Are there
Aye.
any noes? I hear no noes. The ayes have it. Um, just uh, a quick moment.
I could interrupt with a portal. I think, Member Ash, your intention now would be to take a vote on the electronic meeting.
Well, actually, since most people haven't read it, I was gonna motion, since it was on the agenda, I was gonna motion that we table it to the next meeting to give people enough time to read it. We could read it now because it's short, but I don't know if people want to read it now.
I believe that we are in the middle of a question section. Well, we're in the middle of new business, but because we've already asked council to revise the bylaws, will be.
So, pardon the interruption, but you considered this with the vote earlier to
Okay.
table everything under agenda item 4. So you actually already have tabled this. It was just a question of whether you wanted to revisit it and vote on just the electronic meeting policy separately. What you've done in a formal sense is you've already put that on your agenda for next month. So if you're happy to leave it there, you've already done it.
I'd like to vote on it, but I don't think anybody's read it yet. Has anybody read this?
Tabled it for next session. And when you brought it up, it was allowing this to be back in question. So now the question, I guess, would lie in, are we going to continue with it being tabled for our next session?
If it's okay with you, member Cheryl,
Yeah, I don't think anybody's read it. I just meant, this wouldn't normally be in the bylaws, would it?
No, I agree with you. I think just the way it came before you, though, it came before you as
Right.
part of this one agenda item and the senses of,
Technically, it's not part of the bylaws.
no, technically it wouldn't be, but I think the way it was presented to you this evening, the board elected not to take any action on
Okay.
items like this that you're not prepared to vote on. So the option that essentially you brought up was untabling just that item, but there's been no motion to do that. So there's nothing before the board right now.
Well, we definitely need to do this the next time because in reading it, you can only attend so many times electronically. And we're in bad weather. So you could have March and even April. And I think we just need to get this.
now, council, you just told member Cheryl that this will not be a part of the bylaws. So where will we put our agreement on how we use electronic participation in these meetings, if not in our bylaws?
Well, I think the open door law requires public bodies to adopt effectively a policy. So, I mean, you're going to have bylaws and policies. I think the intention from Corporation Counsel's office was to do it as a separate ordinance, which is really a policy ordinance, because that's how the city itself and other bodies under the city of South Bend do it. So I guess the simple answer is you can adopt policies that are not included in your bylaws. In fact, that may be something that happens with some frequency, because if you view the bylaws as the basics of how we operate, you can adopt policies on top of those that are more specific. So I agree with you in the sense that it is not in the bylaws. Procedurally, the way it came up today was when you considered that agenda item, you tabled everything to next month. And we really don't have any business in front of us, because unless you want to move to untable it and vote on it, it's already been put over till next month.
I just want to make sure that we get this as a policy as soon as possible.
I don't disagree. And I think that you've been able to conduct business tonight because you have a physical quorum.
Right.
But you've agended it for next month, and I think that when the membership has an opportunity to review it, it'll be right for a vote then.
With me?
There is a section that deals with that in the bylaws, and since we already have a request to you, Counselor, to revise that to be fitting, we would imagine you would take a look at this information provided by council and revise it with a recommendation that makes sense based off of historically what we've asked for and requested.
Yes.
All right, so we're all good to go, Madam Cheryl? Membership, okay. We're moving on from that item without objection. Now we get to, looks like 9, public comment section, where there is 3 minutes per speaker. If there are any speakers and they will have signed up before the meeting begins, is there a sign up list? My son, did you sign up to speak before us today? Okay, all right. Okay, so I don't see a sign. I'm just making sure no one feels left out. All right, we're gonna close that section and go to board member comments. Is there any announcements?
Mobile things are regularly, right?
Yes,
So we can attend if we want to.
that's correct. And it'll also be listed on Facebook too. Yeah.
Member Sharia, is there any announcements from the board?
Oops.
I see you blinking. Is there any announcements from the members? Requests for future agenda items?
And then the other thing I would like to hear from the director is, I noticed that, and I've lost it, that we belong to the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement. I would like to know, do they have videos? Do they have writings, things that I could look at?
Yeah.
And to better understand how other oversight boards have operated, what are the best practices?
Mhm.
So if you could just have either like how we access that stuff.
No problem.
Oh, wait, hold on, I'll show you the sheet. I lose stuff. Here, this is it. Because I remembered while back, very far back, doing some research on this, and that's my understanding. If you belong to it, then your board members can access training.
That's correct.
Okay,
Yeah,
I
there's
just
quite a
would
bit.
like to know how to access that training.
I will add that as an agenda item for the next meeting, but there's quite a bit. Yeah.
Or perhaps that's something that you can just email us when you have a moment.
That works.
I fully anticipate that at the next meeting, we'll be taking care of the business. Okay, Member Comonique. Maybe now is the time for any special requests to be made for consideration.
Regard to our current tabling of particular items and allowing Pastor King to have further conversations with council concerning our open or seemingly open board spots, I will yield back.
Okay, that's clear. Okay, are there any other requests for future agenda items? You all, I'm trying to get us out of here, but just give me 30 seconds to think. Okay, moving forward, when you have a moment, please review the Robert's Rules of Order. This board will try its best to conduct itself in accordance with the Robert's Rules of Order. Unless necessary, we will attempt to keep our meetings at about an hour. And we will make sure that we all start with a certain amount of time, if you will, for each of us to use how we will throughout the meeting. So that you know, just to keep things in order, some housekeeping, so things can move smoothly and everybody can feel comfortable. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, I would like to thank the council. Thank you, Director. Thank you, council. And I'm going to move that this meeting be adjourned. There's a second for the meeting to be adjourned. All in favor with the ayes? Is it okay if I say I better not hear any no's? Okay, any no's? There are no no's. All right, and we are adjourned.